areas in climate change adaptation and in mitigation. And in addition, he highlighted the fact that in addition to providing protecting ecosystem services such as disaster reduction, clean water, and other services for the local communities, these are protected areas, is an area that governments and society need to make significant investments in. The objective of this particular workshop really is to take a look at natural solutions. The principles have been set forth and identify where some of the countries have actually started leading in the implementation of this very important document. Today we're going to hear from some of the countries who are what I call the early adopters of natural solutions, and listen to some of the challenges and successes that they're facing, and some of the lessons learned within during their implementation process. So we will be identifying best practices during the course of this workshop in how to go about mainstreaming protected areas into climate adaptation and mitigation. And as well, we're going to challenge ourselves in looking at how can we, as individuals and organizations who are aware of the benefits of natural solutions, how can we broaden this understanding to other organizations and other groups in order to provide support for the relevance of protected areas. And as well, we're seeking your input and support for a motion that we have put together in order to shape the IUCN's program of work on natural solutions to climate change. The anticipated output from this workshop is really to get agreement amongst ourselves on what are the key elements of best practices for mainstream. And in fact, we're going to take a look at your input. How do we take this input and move forward on future implementation of natural solutions? And again, surrounding the motion 112, seeking your support and support of those outside this room to ensure that that very important motion becomes a resolution into the future. And as well, we're seeking you and your organization's commitment to continue to collaborate on the development and implementation of these best practices. So the outcomes, we see guidance and tools that are being developed, and we'll hear about many of these during the next set of presentations. And really to look at how we assess, expand, and manage protected areas network as really part of our organizations or our country's climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies. And certainly into the future, we can, if we implement this successfully, it will certainly add another area of significant relevance of the need and for protected areas globally. And certainly that is a question that all of us in this room are challenged by. So here's the agenda, and before going through this agenda, I just want to ask our speakers to stay on time. I've been asked by our technical staff that the translators will need to move on to another session shortly after. So I'm going to facilitate as well as play the chair's role with a very large alarm clock. So I'm without further ado, we're already running late, so I'm not a very good chair. I would like to introduce our first speaker, who requires no introduction, Kathy McKinnon, who is the IUCN World Commission from the World Commission on Protected Areas, the deputy chair. I was going to make a joke here, and I'm not sure if I should or not. Kathy was going to give a presentation on 50 reasons why she should the next WCPA chair. But instead, she, in fact, will talk about putting active solutions to work, protected areas, helping people cope with climate change. Thank you.
Conversely, if we start to degrade or clear those areas, we're increasing the amount of global greenhouse emissions. And this is happening at something like 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions a year coming from land conversion. Now, it's been estimated, and this is a conservative estimate, that 15% of terrestrial carbon is stored in protected areas. So the Amazon Regional Protected Area Program, for instance, is estimated to be captured 1.8 billion tons of carbon, and the carbon stock there is 4.5 million tons. This is a vast area of 30 million hectares of protected areas. Very important for mitigation. But ecosystems are also going to be part of the adaptation agenda. And adaptation is going to become one of the most important parts of the development agenda. Natural ecosystems they maintain the integrity of natural systems, they buffer climate, they reduce the risks and impacts of extreme events like droughts and floods and storms, they provide essential services like water and fisheries, protect wild crop relatives, and help the ecosystems restrict the spread of invasive alien species and disease vectors. So we know that protected areas are a green solution, they really are part of green growth. They're proven, they're cost-effective, sustainable risk solutions, reducing the impact of climate change. There have been many good studies for the arguments for protection. Water security, for instance, is going to be a key challenge as we go forward. 1/3 of major cities around the world depend on protected areas for clean domestic water. Agriculture is the biggest user of fresh water. Most countries use 50% of their fresh water for agriculture. Some countries as much as 95%. In the Australian Alps, protected areas are responsible for producing 30% of the annual imports to the Murray-Darling Basin. This is Australia's food program, and that value is something like $10 million a year. And protected areas are also important for maintaining water flows that are generating hydropower, as we see in Colombia and Peru. Protected areas are also important for protecting against hazards. So you have coral reefs, coastal wetlands, and mangroves that are dealing with coastal protection, but they're also dealing with fisheries and food security. In Vietnam, an investment of just over $1 million, a one-time investment, is estimated to save over $7 million a year in sea maintenance and reduce damage from typhoons. Similarly, in Switzerland, many of the forests are protected to stop avalanches. In Mali, the role of national parks in desertification control and a reservoir for drought-resistant species is already recognized. If we look at just one country, Madagascar, an economic study done there in 2002 showed that maintaining natural ecosystems was the most cost-effective thing to do. This led to the president of Madagascar declaring that he would create 6 million hectares of new protected areas. Those of you at the World Park Congress in Durban may remember that announcement. And this program is now ongoing. It's very clear that deforestation is much less in protected areas than in unprotected forests. And once it's fully operational, the new system of protected areas is expected to reduce CO2 emissions by about 9 million tons a year. Just one new forest corridor, Ambositra Vandrosa, for instance, is giving you carbon storage, fresh water supplies, species value, it's providing health and food security, hydro and cultural services. We need to get much better at getting these messages across about the multiple values of protected areas. So what do we need to do? Of course we need protected areas for biodiversity conservation, but we also need to be stressing these multiple other values. We need to protect more and larger protected areas, including marine and fresh water. We need to look at areas that are good for carbon and biodiversity, better protection of watersheds, peatlands, areas that store carbon. We need also to think about better connecting protected areas in landscapes and seascapes. That's linking them geographically, but also linking them to the social context. Full range of protected areas, governance types, everything from state to communities, and improving protection and management of multiple values for carbon, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. And we also need to think about restoration. Where and when does it make sense to restore degraded habitats within and around protected areas, including the removal of invasive alien species? It's been estimated that to get better coverage of all important biodiversity areas, to put them under protection, it could cost something like $23 billion a year. That's estimated to be 4 times what is currently spent on these areas. It sounds like an enormous sum of money. That is until you think that globally we spend $17 billion a year on pet food and $34 billion a year on diet products. So this workshop is all about mainstreaming. What do we mean by that? We mean that we need to better incorporate protected areas into development planning and strategies, into climate change and adaptation strategies, disaster reduction strategies, and spatial development plans. But we also should be thinking about protected areas as green infrastructure. And there are good examples of this already. For instance, the Lambton 2 Dam in La PDR helped to establish a new protected area, 400,000 hectares of forests. This is done really to protect the dam and to extend the life of the dam to stop sedimentation. The protected area will be funded with $1 million from the hydro company over 30 years. Similarly, in Argentina, a big World Bank loan to help with flood control is investing in some water infrastructure, but also in protection of riverine forests, which naturally control water flows. And in North Sulawesi, 300,000 hectare national park was again created to reduce sedimentation and extend the life of new irrigation canals. How are we going to fund all of this? Well, GEF has committed $700 million to protected areas over the current 4-year period. But that's peanuts in comparison to all the other funds that are available. There are huge amounts in carbon funds, Red Plus mechanisms for reduced deforestation also could throw out additional resources. And so too with regular development funds, as we've seen in the green infrastructure projects. So what we really need to do is move on now beyond advocacy to action. I think we've made a convincing case for protected areas in helping to address climate change. Now what we're looking for is really good examples and case studies of where this is being done. You're going to hear some of those today, but we're actually looking forward also to hearing much more from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Do we have time for one or two questions? So, Kathy, or should we just wait till the end?
Should we wait till the end?
Okay. Our next presenter is Julian Miranda Mondano from Parque Nacional Natural de Colombia. And it's a pleasure to ask Julian to come to the podium if I can find her.
Good morning, everybody. I want to begin thanking the organizers of this event for inviting me to present the Colombian case. And if it is okay with you and we take advantage of the translating, I would love to do it in Spanish. And I will wait until you are ready. Este es el mapa de Colombia, en donde tenemos hoy 56 parques nacionales, que son las áreas protegidas de más estricta categoría en nuestro país. Son 12.600.000 hectáreas del territorio colombiano,